If you are a landscape or nature photographer that enjoys shooting with a telephoto lens, then this is going to be the video for you. Hello everybody, my name is Austin James Jackson. I'm a professional landscape photographer based in southern Utah. Today we're out in the beautiful Death Valley National Park here shooting some telephoto shots. I climbed to this really tall peak in order to look down on my subject, which is just these beautiful rolling hills behind me, to shoot some telephoto scenes. In today's video we're talking about 3 tips you can use to take better telephoto scenes when you're out shooting yourself. These are going to be quick hitting, really easy to apply on your next shoot. They're not things that require you to purchase more gear or anything like that. Just going to be 3 super quick hitting tips. First thing that I want to talk about is the gear that I'm using to do this. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with the tips, but a lot of you guys are always asking what I'm using to shoot with, especially when I'm making a video like this. So to shoot telephoto shots, what I'm using is this Sony a7R IV. Love the 60 however many megapixels. I'm using the Sony 70-300 f4.5 to 5.6. Great telephoto lens. And then I'm using the Slick carbon fiber 833 tripod, as well as the Slick PBH 635 AC ball head. That's pretty much all the gear that I'm using for all my telephoto shots. Occasionally I'll use like a polarizer. I like using the Hoya HD3 or maybe a neutral density filter. I also like using the Hoya HD3 ND filters. So that's what I'm using to shoot my telephoto shots. So that's the gear that I'm using. Let's go ahead and jump into tip number 1. So tip number 1 is to follow the light. Now this is just a great tip in general for landscape photography, but this especially applies to telephoto shots. A lot of photographers go out and they don't think about light. A lot of times they're looking for flat light, days where it's cloudy, where they can go out and get really even flat lit shots. However, for telephoto photography where you're zooming in on maybe some hills or some trees or a rock or whatever it may be, I really like having a little bit of light because it's going to allow you to kind of separate your, like the front of your subject from the back. It's going to give it some dimension. So light is always really important. You can see maybe the sun is still up. It's probably about an hour and a half before sunset. I'm out here super early because I want to catch that light. The sun is going to go behind the hill here way before sunset, probably like 30 minutes before. So I want to make sure to get here plenty early so that I can catch that last bit of light hitting my subject, which is these beautiful hills. Light is so important. Always show up early. A lot of times with these telephoto shots, if you have a nice cloudy day where the sunlight is breaking in and out of the clouds, you can actually shoot during the middle of the day, which I know for landscape photography is shocking to think that you can actually capture photos not at sunset or sunrise. But with telephoto photography, all you really need is the right amount of light, just a touch of light on your scene. It's going to help add a lot of dimension compared to a scene with no light, which is really flat. And a lot of times you can make this work, but I do think generally speaking it is more ideal to have the light in your scene. Now, tip number 2 is to get high up. Now, the reason why you want to be high rather than low is because when you're low, a lot of times you don't get really good layers. You can't see a lot. And for some telephoto scenes, this doesn't matter. But for ones like the one that I'm shooting here where I've got hills, I want to be as high as I can so I can see as many possible layers. If I'm down on like the ground level, I'll only be able to see what's in front of me. I can't see what's behind it. Whereas the higher you get, the more you'll be able to see, the further you can zoom in and still capture things in your image. So height is super important. No matter what you're shooting, I always think it's usually better to get a little bit higher for any kind of telephoto scene. Now, a prime example that a lot of you may know of that I can think of is the Palouse Hills. When you go out to the Palouse Hills, you're usually there in the spring. You want to capture the nice rolling green hills. Now, the best time to be out there as a photographer, like I said, is the spring, and people like to get up on what's called Steptoe Butte. It's this top little butte where you can look down. Now, the reason why it's the best place to be is because it's higher than everything else. So you're looking down, you can see hills in every direction for miles. By getting higher, you kind of get that bird's eye view where you have a lot more sight than you would by being on the ground. So higher, generally speaking, is better. If I look through all my telephoto images, almost every single one that I really like, I'm shooting from above my subject and I'm shooting down and into my subject. Here is no different. I'm shooting down and into the hills. So that is tip number 2. Always get higher if you can. Now, tip number 3 really goes into how to find the best compositions. I'm generally looking for 3 different things when I'm trying to find a telephoto composition. The first thing is pattern. So if I'm looking for pattern, I might be looking for a pattern that's the same or a pattern that's changing, but I'm looking for something that really looks good to the eye, some kind of pattern. So whether it's layers and layers of trees stacked behind each other, whether it's layers of hills, whatever that pattern may be, maybe it's something in particular about the rocks or the dirt, but I'm looking for pattern in order to find some really intriguing compositions. Now, the second thing that I'm looking for is lines. So I'm looking for nice sweeping lines coming through the scene. One thing that you'll think of when you hear this probably is maybe some sand dunes. You can think of all the different sweeping lines of the sand dunes. The S-curve, of course, is always really popular with photographers. Anything that kind of adds some interest to your scene by creating really nice lines is really, really nice to have in your scene. Now, when you're looking for these lines, make sure that the crop on your image is done in a way where it really helps accentuate the line. You don't want to cut out the most interesting part of the line with your crop. So look for lines as you're looking for a great composition. Now, the third thing, and probably the most important and the best thing, if you can find it, is that I'm looking for abnormalities. Now, this is going to be things like a rock surrounded by mud, like right where I'm at right now. I can see all these hills and there's all this like mud, but if I was to see like a really cool cracked rock or something that was like out of the ordinary, like a different color, that would be perfect. Another thing I can think of is like in the Palouse Hills, back to that example before, one of my favorite shots from there, I have this tree just sitting in the middle of the field. That's an abnormality. Even though a tree normally grows in a field, it's an abnormality out where I'm shooting because there's not a bunch of trees. It's by itself, so it looks really, really intriguing. Ultimately, when we're looking for abnormalities, we're looking for things that stand out and help make our photo unique, help them look really interesting to the viewer. There's a wide range of things that could be abnormalities, really just anything that helps kind of make your scene look different or really strike or pop out at you. That's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm looking for an abnormality. Let's pause for just a second. I want to show you exactly what I mean when I'm talking about those three things I want to find in order to get a great composition. Let me show you the back of my camera screen here. So this would be a composition that I think shows off some lines really, really nicely. You can see how there's kind of multiple different lines going left as well as down that are really accentuating the composition. However, this scene is missing some light. This is just an example of showing some lines. There's also a little bit of pattern going on in this scene here. You can see that there is some nice patterns coming down through the mud there that I think look really nice. Now let's look for a composition with a little bit better light. Now, composition like this one, you can see it has the light, but it doesn't have a lot of the other aspects. The other nice thing about this composition is that it's a little bit different in that it has something different going on. It's not just the regular yellow sand or yellow mud, whatever you want to call this. You can see that it's got that little brown stripe down there. That is going to make it a little bit more interesting. Now, if I was actually going to photograph this, I would probably flip the rotation and shoot this vertically because, as you can see on the top left and top right of this frame here, it's not too incredibly interesting, but if you flipped it straight up and down, you'd have some nice shadows on the right, some nice sunlight on the left and on the top, and I think this would make a really, really nice composition. All right, well, those are my best 3 tips for you guys to improve your telephoto landscape photography compositions. Really hope that this was helpful for you. I think these are 3 really quick hitting tips. These are things I'm always telling people at my workshops when we're out shooting telephoto compositions. If you guys have any questions or comments, I would love to hear them. Please drop them down below. I'm always looking forward to reading what you guys have to say. And as always, please make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.